Hello everyone, my name's King, and mushrooms are underrated. Now, I know what you're asking. King, what do you mean they're underrated? They're everywhere. You have multiple different kinds, you can use them whenever, they grow in dark places, they're really annoying to get, they make the weirdest food source ever, etc, etc. Well, what I mean by that is you rarely ever see them being used in builds. Like, sure, there's the fantasy builds and like forests and things, and there's like just in general foresty stuff, and then you have like the big tree and you can just like plant down a mushroom, bone meal in, yay! And now that we're in 1.16, there's the biomes in the nether that are more or less just like a mushroom forest. And yes, I know some people consider those trees or use them as a form of a tree, but I mean, look at them. They're mushrooms. Yeah, they're just mushrooms. But I believe they can be a fantastic build all on their own, and even in groups. Or if that ever made sense. But yeah. So, here are some mushroom designs for all of you similar fanatics thinking mushrooms could make really interesting builds. And here we go. Alrighty, so we have, let's see, there's those count kinda, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 different kinds of mushroom builds that you can use in your world or standalone as just interesting variations off of typical mushroom designs and things. So you can use them anywhere you want, add them to builds, put them inside of different biomes, custom biomes, things, and stuff. And yeah, so let's get into it. So all of these are really fantastic, but they would not exist without these. These are all the different kinds of mushrooms you can get, as well as some other stuff that kind of counts. And on their own, in my opinion, they are fantastic for decoration. If you use the nether ones, you can get some much needed color in otherwise unnoticeable situations. They have interesting color dynamics that you can play around with. And in general, it's just a really great way to spice up a build. And so for this video, the things I'm going to count as mushrooms is the mushrooms, which are these. The nether sprouts, the nether or warped roots, the crimson roots, which in my opinion is kind of like the most loose one out of all these. It looks more grassy than rooty, in my opinion. Some coral fans. I prefer the dead bubble because it's a bit more blocky than the others. The others are kind of wispy, more on this side of things, but it works great as like just a small like fungi growing off dead logs and things. And we also grab some of the other nether materials down the line because they just work great as just weird tangly viney fungi stuff. But as far as like the basic one block kind of stuff, those don't quite work in my opinion. They're vines, so. But yeah, so on their own, the default mushrooms Minecraft gives you, fantastic. Beautiful blocks, wonderful to work with. And just an all-around great include, a great include for whatever you're building. Always fun to work with. Next up, we are now in the territory in this row of builds we are now in the territory of small mushrooms. Now, you don't have to just have, like, you know, the whole, there we go, and then, blah, 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 blah. Bone meal it, boom, mushroom. That's kind of boring. And calling this a giant mushroom is also kind of boring. And just in general, there's so many different ways you can build things, and so many different scales you can work at. And so, as with custom trees, which a custom tree video actually inspired me to make this, shout out to Toby from Artorvian. He has a wonderful, wonderful tutorial kind of video that all encompasses a bunch of different tree designs and things. Wonderful if you want like a companion to this on trees and then mushrooms, so you have the two Minecraft big plant stuff. His video will be up there somewhere. But yeah, as how with trees, you can have multiple different sizes. You can have ones that have like something along the lines of, say, this, and then you grab the tree, and then you can go bop, 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 and then yay, tiny little tree. You can do the same thing with mushrooms. So that's what this first row is. They're just tiny mushrooms, something you can like stick in front of a house or something, depending on the kind of house you have. And they're just like an intermediary between the block and the giant. So here we go. Here's the red mushroom using diorite walls for the stem, and then just a red mushroom block, which you can use Silk Touch to get, and just some red concrete as just like a texture variation between the two. You could also have white concrete for like the big spots and the red concrete in place of the mushroom block. But personally, I love using the mushroom block because it's the only block in the game where by placing it by or next to it and removing it, you get this different texture, and it's entirely unique too. For instance, if I were to just pillar up and place that there and look at all sides, that texture does not exist until I place another one and remove it, which means I can control two different kinds of textures. So this could be like an outside block, and this is a wallpaper or something along those lines. It's the only block in the game that's like that, the mushroom blocks. And so whenever I get the chance, I'm gonna use this. Plus, you know, we're doing mushrooms, so mushroom blocks are essential for mushrooms. But yeah, so in order to build this, it's nothing too crazy. It's basically how you would build a normal tiny little tree. You use the mushroom or the diorite wall as the stem, and then you just go up. And personally, I don't like it when builders do something along those lines to give it a little bit of a curve. It just feels too right angular. Like it's too small of a scale for that to be necessary. And so you just go straight up, however tall you want to go, and then you just build a little tree. It's legit just the same as a regular tree. You gotta be careful as to how you do some of the stuff with it, but there you go. Nice little mushroom. It's nothing too major. It's got a little bit of lumpiness to it, which is always important in my opinion. If you're doing the mushrooms that are kind of cone shape, I prefer to have them be a bit on the lumpy side, so that from this angle it looks like it is a bit of a cone, like a misshapen cone. And over here the same thing, but it doesn't feel too flat. Like it doesn't feel too rectangular, which is something you're going to end up facing whenever it's like at this small of a scale. But red mushroom is not complete without its brown mushroom counterpart, the two original mushrooms in the game. And so the brown mushroom is actually much easier than the red mushroom, because regardless of what it looks like as an item, they are very well known for just being flat. So I just took that into account. You just go straight up, and then you build a square. And there you go. Hasta la vista. It's a... Why did I say that? It's a mushroom. Wow. And of course you can add some texture variation, such as this. And personally, something I found I like doing is to add the inside on the bottom so it mimics like the actual like generated mushrooms. And on this particular one, and as you can see on some of the ones on the larger side, I made another secondary, because mushrooms aren't just like the one thing. They can like split off and fork off and have like a bunch of different tops, kind of like a flower or any other plant, even though they're technically not plants, which is confusing. Mother Nature confusing people every day of the week. But yeah, so it's actually super duper simple, just straight up and then squares. And as long as you make it feel like there's a curve to it, then it works. Ooh, there was a fly. So next is the red and brown mushrooms of the nether. We have the spicy guy and the teleporty one. So first we got the fungi. And so for this, similar to those, I just treat it like I would a tree. So I got some dark oak fences to try to mimic, to the best of my ability, the stalk on the item. Because if we take like the fence of that, we just get like this bluish color, which is cool and all, but then the entire tree is just that blue, which does not work in my opinion. Like the stalk has to be like at least for these mushrooms, they have to be this darker color before you get to the bluish top. So again, like usual, you just go straight up with the fences, and then I got the warped wart block, and then I also got a stripped warp hyphae as like a texture variation bit. And then it's actually very similar to the red mushroom. You just kind of make a blob, tree-like blob. And I tried my best to keep the top of it flat, because the item, which I wish the giant tree variants that you get in vanilla look similar to their block counterparts, because the block is like characteristically long and flat, kind of like the brown mushroom, but it's obviously like red mushroom-esque in design, and that has these like orange dots on them, and it's really cool. I like it. So I tried my best to incorporate that. Like I originally made it like the red mushroom where it's all floofy and round, and then I just took slabs and broke some blocks to give it this like slight angle, but it's more or less flat. Then I came in later with some acacia wood and acacia slabs to give it that orange dotted look that the item has. And yeah, I think it's nice and simple. It's actually really cool, and I could totally see myself using this in a build somewhere. And of course, the teleporty one is not complete without the spicy one. And the spicy one is a bit different. The item is extremely unique in my opinion. This is one of the most standout-ish mushrooms out of all of them. Like, this one stands out amongst those two, but I can see it fitting in pretty well. But this one is just so unique looking, and so weird looking too. So again, I went with dark oak fences because the crimson fence has this like purplish color, which I mean, it kind of works, but both of those are basically the same color except for the like animated bit. So I went with the same fence color and pretend I'm just pretending there's animated bit to it. Ooh. So it's a similar design to that one. I just made it tiny bit shorter. Nothing major, just a tiny bit. And then I tried making it a bit pointier. So as you can see, out of all of the mushrooms, this one comes to a point, which is right here. You don't need to do that, but the way I envision it, the warped mushroom is like the brown mushroom, so it's like the taller, flatter one. And then the crimson mushroom is the same as the red mushroom. It's the stockier, floopier one, I guess. So I used a nether wart block because I think that's what the crimson thing uses. I'm not sure. I haven't been to the nether yet. And then I used magma blocks for the orangey bit. I could have used acacia, but I feel like just due to the natural vibrancy of the nether wart block, it has this like dark red to it, while the warped wart block kind of has a more cyan-y, kind of melded blue, if that makes any sense. So the magma block just sort of helps out with the nether wart block to give this like very vibrant, dark, nethery color to it. And then on top of that, I used red nether brick slabs. In the same way, I used the warp slabs to give it a little bit more of a flow to it and shape to it. And I did not use the crimson slabs for the same reason I did not use it for the stalk. It just isn't the same color. It doesn't feel the same. But yeah, overall, just make it all weird and misshapen, and it just in general looks kind of like a mushroom, and that's always fun. And then of course these two, this one in particular is very much just an oversized version of the item. So here I use the warp fence and the same warped and stripped variants, and I just go up with it and then put the bobble bit at the end, kind of mimicking this, where it has this like twisty kind of thing, and it has that like weird thing that for some reason my mind always thinks it's like an eye or something, but it's not. It just has that like bobble at the end. This is basically that. And because of the small scale of it, I don't have to do any wavy stuff. I just have to go straight up and down. And I usually, for the smaller scale, I keep it between 1 to 3 blocks. Nothing too tall. And then I took the twisting vines as like another variant of the fences to bring back some of that twistiness to it. So it just has this weird, like, you can tell it's a mushroom, but it's like this weird alien sort of aesthetic to it, and it's confusing and all kinds of twisty and stuff, and it's definitely something I really like, and I'm going to use in a lot of builds from now on, this sort of weird alien plant life thing. And then here, this is the red, the crimson equivalent of it. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it, but I had to have something that resembled crimson roots, but there's not a lot you can do to make this at any scale other than each pixel's a block kind of thing. So I just use acacia fences, and I actually put a flower pot with the root in there to give it like this little bit of tough, like maybe these are just giant blades of grass or whatever. And honestly, that worked out pretty good. And then I just threw in some of the magma blocks and the wart stuffs, and it looks okay. I could have done better, but it looks okay. And then of course here is really the only time you can use the bubble coral fan thing, and it's like growing. It's just like a kind of fungi that grows off of trees and whatnot. And if you're not a big fan of this like floofy bit, or like the color, the grayish color, you can also use smooth quartz slab, which is a more accurate color, but in my opinion, just like a less planty sort of feel to it. Like it feels very solid and blocky, while the fans actually feel like it's some kind of plant, like it's in the style of the roots and things, and it's just something growing off of the tree. And of course, it entirely depends on like the scale too. Like something this might be too small for like a really big tree, while this would be like just like a bigger variant of this. It's like this is a bunch of tiny little fungi, and then this is just like a big oversized one fungi within the fungi kind of thing. I don't know, it's all up into interpretation. That's just what all this is. It's just interpreting blocks to make it look like other blocks. And that's just building in general, really. But yeah, so that's all of the tiny blocks, or the tiny mushrooms and fungi. Now on to their big brothers and sisters. Because, yeah. Why is that so tall? Did I make it that tall? No, I did not. Well, it's that tall now. Twisting vines, you gotta love them. Alright, so, on to the big guys. So first off, we have the red mushroom, which is actually very similar to the small mushroom, to the point where like it has the little spin-off bit that is the tiny mushroom. The only difference is we are using the mushroom stem this time. And what I do with the mushroom stem, I just go up a bit and then choose an angle, sometimes at a diagonal, and then choose, you know, I'm gonna go up a little bit more, and then nope, that's not curvy enough, maybe a tiny bit more there. That kind of thing. And then you could just go with that and then have like the big bobble bit at the end here and call it a day. But if you're like going up a certain distance, I feel like a great way to showcase that this is like a really big tree or big mushroom is to just go off again. And so look at me, now I am forking off, and that's actually a weird angle. That doesn't feel right. Maybe it's something more like that. Yeah, that's okay. Or like that, maybe? Yeah, there we go. And then you put the bobble bits with the same sort of like blobby shape that you would the small ones. Just keep adding blocks until it feels big enough and feels mushroomy enough and just feels right. Like there's no real way to build it correctly. You just gotta have to feel with it and glow with the flow. Glow with the foe. There we go. Go with the flow. And then I sort of put the fans on top of it, like maybe it's a fungi growing off a mushroom. Yeah, that looks cool. And so there we go. And these actually, I believe most of these are the same size as the default Minecraft equivalent. So it's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-ish blocks. Some of them taller, some of them shorter. Just eyeball it and feel whatever feels right to have at that scale. Because you could totally make even bigger mushrooms, but I'm not sure why you would. But I mean, if you want, you can make one that's like 200 blocks tall, and it's like this big mushroom city thing. That'd be interesting. Anyway, so that's red mushroom. Here's brown mushroom. The brown mushroom is more or less the same as the red mushroom and same sort of aesthetic as the smaller ones. Just remember, the brown mushroom is usually the taller of the two, and in this case they're actually more or less the same height. This one is like just a block taller, but it feels taller. Like, you see the verticality to it, while this one, the bits are so big at the end that it kind of feels like stunted, and like it feels like it's sagging a little, while this one is very much prim proper. As you can see, I have it split off very early on, and this side here actually goes really tall, and here I just made like a platform, just like this mouth-shapen platform, just make it like vaguely circular or squarish if you feel like it. And then this one is more or less a full sort of circle shape. If it were to be a circle, it'd just be that, but I personally do not like it when it is like perfect shapes for plants and things. So just get rid of a few blocks, make it seem like from a distance and from certain angles you can definitely see how it's a circle, but overall it's technically not a circle. And then similar to the smaller one there, I just added a little bit more. So this actually has 1, 2, 3, 4 mushrooms growing off of it and sort of splintering off. And I think it looks really cool like that. And then similar to the red mushroom, I put some of these like smaller mushrooms growing off of it. It just gives it this like very sort of planty feel, because without that it might just look like a build, and that, I mean, that's cool, but similar to how with trees, when you plant the leaves, you want it to feel airy and bushy. By adding these fans on it, it gives it this like planty, bushy feel, even though it's mushrooms and they're not plants. But yeah. Next is the spicy one and the teleporty one, version 2. And as you can see, there's a big difference between the two. So for these, it's very much a similar aesthetic as to the giant mushrooms for red and brown, but sort of as a nod to the fact that they were designed to be trees, like nether trees and whatnot. The base of these, I've actually designed them the exact same way you would design a base for a custom tree, where it's a bit thicker at the bottom and then it tapers up. And this one in particular has this like slight angle to it, while this one goes straight up. And using the slabs of that block type to sort of add to the curve a little bit. On this one I did not do that. And then as far as the mushroom bits go, exactly the same. Same kind of texture variation. This one, I gave it the same acacia stuff for the orange blobby bits. I added a bit of a shroom light, because that is a thing they have. And I gave this one like 2. And at this point, I sorta more or less forgot the fact that I was going for this like flat pattern. So it just looks like a regular mushroom, but like a little stockier and a little taller. And yeah, personally I like it. I think it's really cool. And then the Crimson Root version still is a tiny bit pointy. Like from some angles it looks like it's like pointing this way a little bit. But in general, just give it a bit of a curve and make it all bloofy. And I have like the shroom light, and then I have some of these, I think these are twisting vines, sort of growing out from the inside, some of them on the edge, but I don't want them to be too big. I just want it to feel like a willow tree, kinda. I mean, it's a mushroom, not a plant, but still, it's like the willow tree, but for the nether, and it's cool and mushroomy, and I like it. Actually, looking at this kind of bugs me. Back down. Stay. Alright, so next we got the Warped Roots and Crimson Roots, but big version. Or sort of big version. That one's kind of the same size. But the idea for this is we're just taking the same concept of thin bit with big blobble at the end and sort of upgrading. So for this, I took the stripped hyphae and used that as like a bottom bit, and sort of like a flagpole, just like the full blocks, and then after a certain height you go up with the fences and just make it this like tall spike. And then up where the fences are, I sort of just branch off as if it's a tree, and then take the warped blocks and just put it on top. Sometimes if you want, make it like a bit of tree-esque thing where it's like a big bloom. And then every now and then, if it has this big bloom, just put on some slabs to just give it this sort of like mushroomy aesthetic. So it's like a really tall, long mushroom. And yeah, that's just the general idea for these. And then you just do a bunch of them bundled together, and then on the bottom ground, put some slabs up against the block so it feels like its roots going straight up, and then put the actual block, and then the twisting vine, similar to the other one, it's just like a different variant and just like a different block in between the two. And in general, it just creates this like really tall alien sort of fungi thing where it's like a tall, thin fungi instead of like the big floppy bit that you usually think of. It's like a very highly specialized version of the brown mushroom where it's like really tall and thin and whatnot. And personally, I like it. And then the warped, or the crimson roots, is a very similar aesthetic, but I personally just made it a bit smaller scale. And while it does have the big floof at the end, it's very much just this like stocky, sort of bamboo-y-esque environment. And then I also have some acacia slabs at the tallest bits, and then put some of the vines to sort of just, you know, it just adds to it and makes it seem like this version is sort of like that, but as it grows taller, it sort of flops over and then droops back down. That's the general idea. And you can make these as big as you want to. It doesn't have to be this specific size, but in general, that's the proof of concept, yeah. And yeah, so there you go. Nice and quick. Blast through all of them. And yeah. That's pretty much all I've got. I've been King, and I'm signing off. Bye.